Hello my friends, speaking to you tonight from a very wind-blown Northern Ireland. You remember in the last episode of chapter 12, the Greens were still sitting with Sean, the commander of the Republicans who had taken them captive. The other two Republicans had gone off to check out their story and see if it was true, and conversation was taking place while they waited. Carol had said that everybody needed peace, including Sean. Aye, Carol, and you're right, but it is to be a peace that takes in the whole country. Or do you just want things to return to how they were in the 6 counties down over the fields there? The old Irish problem, Sean. You know, I could live in peace with you as my neighbour, no problem. And I believe you and Dan could chat over the garden fence anywhere in Ireland. But I also know that some of yours and some of mine couldn't. What we all need is education. No, I don't mean degrees. What I mean is we need a fair account of Irish history that we're all able to learn from. Endless reminders of 1619 and the Battle of the Boyne, or 1916 and the Easter Rising, just feed hate. Not because they happened, but because of how they're perceived in our divided community. For goodness sake, Carol, do you think we can just push the famine, petition Bloody Sunday and interment under the orange and green carpet, and all have a big ceilidh as if nothing happened? We need education, but there are issues to address. Nobody took those seriously before the armed struggle. I understand how you feel, Sean, so I do, but you and I were taught division from the cradle, both of us, parents, teachers, clergy. You know what I mean. My father lost his job. It was his religion, Carol. He worked hard, but he was driven out. That's bad, Sean. There's been so much injustice, and it has happened both ways. Aye, so it has. Sean listened as the sound of a car on a road drew a little closer. But as the three of them listened in sharp anticipation, the vehicle moved on past along a road somewhere nearby. The mood became a silent, thoughtful one, and nobody spoke for several minutes. But it was Danny who, with carefully chosen words, broke the silence. You know, Sean, my great-grandfather was caught up in World War I. He was shot dead in his 3rd week in the trenches. That wasn't justice either. We can't alter all the things that have happened, but we can try for a better future. If you die somewhere in a hail of bullets, they might write a song about you, but it won't help Ireland much. I don't want to die in a hail of bullets. I want to grow old in a free Ireland where I can bounce my grandchildren on my knee and know that they're owners of their own land. But if I am called on to die for this cause, I will not hesitate. There are a long line of good young Irishmen through many centuries who made that sacrifice. It's what's achieved collectively by all of them that's changed minds, changed things. In November 1867, 3 Irish volunteers were hanged in Manchester. Their deaths increased support for the Fenian Rising around the world, and here in Ireland too. They didn't die in vain. You would die for this cause of yours with the birds, well, wouldn't you? Aye, we would. That much we hold in common, Sean. Carol smiled into the face. If they did die, she would be doing so with dignity. Sean could see that. Danny nodded his agreement. He was staring the Irish Republican Army in the face for the first time, and despite his pacifist tendencies and the circumstances they were in, he was moved by the man's conviction. So tell me, Danny Green, this magazine you write for regularly, what's it called? If your story checks out, I'll buy a copy to see how you read. Nature Watch is the name. Carol never missed a chance to promote her husband's writing. You could write a fine article about birdwatching in County Tyrone, so you could. Danny laughed. I could, Sean, but I won't. If you tell the story to whoever you like in 6 months, it won't be a problem. Not to us. But don't tell it before that. If you survive today, that is. Carol grinned despite the menace in the last words. I think you like a bit of publicity, Sean. I do. I want the Brits to know that we're making fools of them. He was very serious now, and his brown eyes rested on Carol like 2 heavy pebbles. She knew that he meant every word, and that if he thought it was required, he would leave them both dead somewhere up here on the Tyrone-Donegal border, and then he would continue his war that he thought was just, and they'd be enemies justly executed as far as he was concerned. The sound of her own heartbeat was a little louder, but she spoke very quietly. Sean, do you ever think that maybe a more moderate approach might have better results? Oh, aye, you mean, like the stickies. Hang up the guns and become part of the problem instead of part of the solution. Sean was referring to the official IRA that his organisation had broken away from earlier in the Troubles when they had called a ceasefire. What do you mean moderate, like your Protestant friends who stay moderate friends of the police until an orange march is stopped? Not so moderate then, are they? When they can't get their own way, they explode like one of our bombs. But that's okay with everyone because they are pro-British rule, so they say. Carol would think back to these words of Sean on the night before the Anglo-Irish Agreement would be signed. Her mother would be visiting an old lady, a family friend who lived in Ashbeg Grove in Dungannon. It was a housing executive estate, the Northern Irish equivalent of council housing. It would be November the 14th, 1985. All hell would break loose in that Milltown area of Dungannon on that night, and Carol's mother would long remember the angry mob trying to march its way up the hill toward the town centre, and the police and the army blocking the road with their Land Rovers. Suddenly the air would be filled with the loud and incendiary petrol bombs. Pavements would be destroyed as paving stones were broken up into hand-sized missiles, enabling so-called law-abiding Protestants to rain down their fury on the Crown's security forces they were so insistent that they supported. Soon those same Crown forces would return to fire using rubber bullets. That night Ashbeg Grove and Milltown would become a battlefield because British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher was committing herself to an agreement with the Irish Republic, and that agreement concerned future events in the northern 6 counties. Carol would also hear about that time too that some young police girls who shared a flat in the same estate were fortunate to escape when loyalists petrol bombed their home. It was true, both communities in Northern Ireland could explode like a firework if a political decision seemed to favour the others. Carol could see that okay, and the whole thing was a cause of frustration to her, and here she was sitting debating with one of Ireland's most wanted men. Danny's mind was considering the situation they were in. He was just hoping that the story could be checked. He thought back to times at home and at school when he'd been punished for things he wasn't guilty of. He remembered at 18 standing in Warminster Town Court speaking the truth to establish a friend's alibi, and then hearing a police officer tell a very twisted version so that his friend was fined for an offence he definitely never committed. He wondered if there was much pain when a bullet hit you. He wondered if they'd get tortured first as they tried to get information from them. That would be really tough because they could only stick to their story. There wasn't anything else. He didn't want to die, and even more he did not want Carol to die. If they shot her first, how would he bear it? He looked at her pretty animated face as she jousted with Sean over Ireland's future. He watched those brave emerald eyes sparkling with her words like green flames. He wondered how would he react. If he could get hold of a gun, would he kill to save Carol's life? It had been 4 hours now, and though the minutes seemed like hours, Danny and Carol held up their heads and kept up their hearts, knowing that these times might be precious if that was all there was. As the sound of a car came closer, until the gravel could be heard under the tyres just outside the door, the Greens exchanged a glance, and Carol gave her husband what appeared to be a confident and reassuring smile. As the door opened, Sean stiffened. The 3 Republicans and the 2 naturalists were now in one room, and the atmosphere was laden with expectancy. In the few seconds of silence, Danny could hear just 2 noises: the ticking of his watch, the one that Carol had brought him soon after they met, and the loud beating of his heart. The thought crossed his writer's mind that it sounded like the drum beat at a public execution. So, sorry to keep you hanging. Bad expression there. But you will find out if their story checked out okay in a way that could be verified in the next episode. Hope you're all well, my friends. Winter's hit us here. We have a very cold, very windy spell. I hope, though, that the sun's shining in your hearts. Love to you from us both. Bye for now.